lifelong friends. At Microsoft, I'm a principal level engineering manager, but the number of times that I've been promoted in my career might actually surprise you. In this video, I'm going to walk through my career journey, starting from my internships in university to my first job outside of university, and then all the way to Microsoft. And I wanted to share this journey with you because I see a lot of people online sharing their journey about how they were able to start in their professional career and make it to some level at senior or beyond very quickly. And while I think it's great for those individuals and it's awesome that they can share their experiences with you, I wanted to offer you a different perspective into how this can look. Before I jump into my story, I just wanted to give you a quick reminder to subscribe to my weekly newsletter. I'll put a link in the comments below so you can check that out. But every week I try to share an exclusive article, early access to videos, and a bit of a recap of software engineering and .NET topics. It's totally free, so there's no strings attached. Alright, so my professional journey in software engineering starts way back in university. At the University of Waterloo, where I attended for computer engineering, we had to go through this co-op program. And this is a really awesome experience because, for me at least, we had to go through a school semester, which was 4 months, and then immediately right into work. And this went back and forth for 5 years straight. And to be totally honest, I wasn't really into school. I took computer engineering because I was into software but wanted to get exposure to hardware, and it really just wasn't for me. But the internships were awesome. This is my first experience working in a professional environment with other software engineers. It was the real deal. If I think back to that point in my life, my work ethic wasn't quite the same as it is today. So how I approached doing my internships looked a lot different than how I approach work. One thing that I am thankful for is that because I had a total of 6 internships based on how the school and internship went back and forth for 5 years, I took advantage of going to different locations and getting a different feel for at least some of them. I wanted to make sure that I could have a good experience and go back to some companies, but towards the end I wanted to venture out and try different things. My first 2 internships, which each were 4 months long, were at a company that was a small consulting software company, and I got to focus on what was needleless injectors for farm animals. And this is super cool because it was embedded software development as well as some exposure to some desktop Python coding on the side. As someone that was writing console applications and WinForm applications at the time, I thought it was so cool to have something hands-on that was embedded and do some programming that way. I had a great mentor at this co-op job, but honestly, when I reflect, I feel like I didn't try to extract more information and insights from him than I could have because he's totally an awesome guy, still runs this company to this day, and not only is he super smart, but he's super kind as well. So I do kind of regret not really leaning into that and just trying to leverage him as a mentor while I could have. But after 2 internships with him, I ended up going to another opportunity for yet another 2 semesters, which was really focused on operating room software. And this sounds pretty intense, and it's pretty interesting, but it's not like I was necessarily working on devices that would be like cutting people open or anything like that. But it was for cameras and really high definition cameras and video feeds to be able to have people that were operating really expensive devices have visuals and have control over what was going on in the operating room. So this is a huge twist on what I was doing before, because in the previous role I had someone mentoring me and guiding me through things, but in this role I essentially had free reign. I worked closely with someone who was giving me specifications for what to build, but I was the only developer. I got to go create all of this operating room software completely on my own, and it was really interesting to have complete architectural direction on something that was essentially greenfield. And while I stayed at this internship 2 semesters as well, something that's important to call out is that when we're talking about promotions and progression, I mean, these were internships. I wasn't getting promoted or anything like that at this point in time, so this is really just about getting as much different experience as I could. And the theme so far, speaking about experience, is that I was sticking to really small companies. I wanted to make sure that the work I was doing was going to be impactful, and that I wasn't going to feel like I was stuck in a cube somewhere just kind of coding away at things or doing something that was going to have very low impact. Things started to shift a little bit when I went for my 5th and 6th internship. However, I still stuck at small companies. They were just, in one case, a little bit bigger, and in the other case, a little bit further away from home. So the 5th internship I had was at a bigger company. It wasn't a startup, but it also wasn't big tech. They made software that allowed banks to configure bank machine screens and how you could interact with that as a user. This is a bit of a hybrid between the first 2 roles that I had in my different internships, because I had mentorship guidance, But because it was an architecture team that worked on prototypes, I also had some of that free reign as well. It was really cool because the people that were mentoring me would give me these challenges to work on, like, we don't have this anywhere else in our software, but we want users to be able to do X. And then I got to go under their guidance, prototype some of these things. And it was awesome because I could go explore different technologies and pull things in and then demo to them and get their feedback and iterate on it with them. Again, a really awesome internship, accumulating experience, having a different perspective on things, but again, not really looking at promotions. Was my pay going up? Sure, slightly. But in this case, it was really like going from one internship to the next and the pay kind of like maybe keeping up with inflation or something like that, or maybe being slightly higher just because I'm at a higher level in university. But overall, not really achieving anything groundbreaking. But at the time, it didn't really matter, right? I was getting some assistance paying for my schooling because of it, and I was getting really awesome exposure. So I was pretty content with that. Now, the last place that I'm going to talk about before I get into my professional career after university was a company that was, like I said, further from home. So I'm from around Toronto, Ontario, and this was all the way out in San Jose. So this was my opportunity to finally go to the US to try out something that was in like Silicon Valley and something exciting. I had a lot of other peers from school that were doing this kind of thing, so I was like, I'm going to try this out. It's going to be super cool. And it was. It was really awesome to be able to live away from home, have this whole new environment around me, and work at a little startup. And this startup made software that would work with iPads and documents, and they had this really cool solution where you had end-to-end encryption, including immediately before the document was rendered on screen. Now, another thing that made this internship different for me, other than just being further away from home and being in the United States, was that I had to use a whole new different language that I was totally uncomfortable with. Not only that, as a C# developer at the time, guess how many different operating systems I'm used to using? One, Windows. And because this was for iPads, that meant that I was using Objective-C and using a Mac, two things I had never touched before. And that's probably surprising to a lot of you, but I just don't use Apple products. So this was a really interesting experience for me. It was uncomfortable because the code I was using and the tools I was using. But what was really awesome was that the people in leadership positions at this company are all brilliant engineers from NVIDIA. So they truly understood how to run their business, but at the same time, everyone up to the CEO that I was working with were incredibly intelligent and had this awesome engineering mindset. So any question you might possibly have about the code or how to approach things, like you could speak to them about anything and you'd have these really detailed, like well explained answers. So again, I got some of this mentorship sort of experience that I had in my first internship, but from totally different sets of people on completely different things. And that essentially wraps up my internships before my professional career started after that. And again, just to recap, because I wanted to talk to you about promotions and compensation's part of that, but the compensation was higher at this last place. That's probably largely due to the fact that one, this is my last internship that I have in university, so I'm sort of at the highest level as a student, but also because it was in the United States. And I think that's a huge differentiating factor compared to what I was seeing. Did that matter to me though? Not at all. Like at that point in time, it was still like, I want these different experiences. The fact that it paid higher just meant that I could cover a little bit more in terms of rent and catching up on student loans, but whatever, I'm still a student, I'm still learning. And one of the things that that first internship taught me, my mentor in particular at the time, was saying, leverage all of your internships to learn things. He had also graduated from the University of Waterloo, so he had gone through this experience. And as much as I enjoyed working with him at his company, he did suggest go try different things. And I took that to heart, and that was something that I tried to leverage as I went through all of this. But that's just the preamble, because now we're going to talk about my professional career. Up until this point, I'm still an individual contributor, a software engineer, and as I embark on my journey in my first real job outside of school, that's what I'm going to be doing. I am a software engineer. So fresh out of school, I ended up taking a job at a company in the city of Waterloo, which is where I went to school, that was started by a former police officer. And to me, this is a really interesting and intriguing opportunity because it was a startup. It was very small and early. It was founded by a police officer who happened to have a technical background. So that was kind of cool. They made digital forensic software, which was totally wild to me. Like, that sounds really fancy. It sounds really exciting. I know nothing about it. And the last part was that they were profitable, but without any investment. And when I thought about startups that I had worked at, they were already underway. They were funded in some capacity, or they were, like I said, underway and had paying customers and that kind of thing. So it never felt like a risk. But what I had heard from other people going to startups was that you got to be careful because you might start there. And because it's a startup, it's pretty likely to fail. But hearing that this company was already profitable without investments and they were able to just continue on and start to scale, I thought that was a really awesome opportunity. When I thought about the size of the team and sort of where the product and stuff was at, to me it just seemed like I was back at one of the other places I had been working, starting on a newer project. It just felt like there was a lot of opportunity to learn and to grow. So, sure, I tried haggling my salary a little bit, but I'm pretty terrible at this kind of thing. So, it seemed like a good opportunity. Pay seemed decent. Heck yeah, I'm ready to go, and I'm ready to start putting myself into the work I'm doing. Or was I? Because early on, when I was going through those internships, like I said, my work ethic was a lot different. I was excited to be able to start this job full time because that was exciting, but my work ethic going into this wasn't so great. For my internships, I basically just put in my 9 to 5 when I could. It was like work was interesting, but I don't want to be here, so I'm going to get out. And as much as I was trying to take opportunities to learn at work, I really treated that work time as like, this is my window, and anything outside of that, not going to touch. But this was a bit of a different beast because when I started, and I probably had a bit of that same mentality carrying over, I realized how fun and exciting this was. I realized that the people I was working with were building something really awesome. It felt super rewarding to be able to contribute to it. And this is the most cliche thing ever, but it felt like with a small group of us, it was a bit like a family. We would stay late and fix bugs, and then we would go out on Fridays and Saturdays together and hang out. And I know that this isn't like the normal thing that you would do at companies, and I'm not saying to go look for this, but this just seemed to happen naturally. It was really fun to be able to work together. And I can remember times really early on. I wrote about this recently, but one of the worst bugs I ever had to fix had to do with licensing. And I can remember going into the office. It was like 2 in the morning working with one of the other guys, actually the first engineer that they hired, and we were trying to figure out this licensing bug super late, but it didn't feel like work. Like I was happy to be there working on it with him. And I know that sounds odd. It's not like I was getting I wasn't getting overtime pay or something like that. It was just something that I felt encouraged and motivated to do. And that's what we did. And that mentality carried on. And it wasn't long. It was probably, I think, within like 6 months or so that they had realized that as they're starting to hire more people, like there's only a few people that are probably like able to kind of coach or talk to some of the other engineers. And it's not because they have years and years of experience. It's just because they're able to communicate with them and seem to be able to guide them. I was one of those people. So this is one of the first opportunities that seems kind of like a formal promotion, but they really just said, hey, you're kind of leading these teams right now. Could we just more officially organize you guys to have some different scope? And we said, sure, like we're already doing that. Makes sense. Let's keep going. So 6 months into my first job, no promotion, but my scope changed. I was effectively leading a team, and I was effectively, not realizing at the time, becoming a formal manager. So on the surface, at this point in time, I was thinking, cool, I'm responsible for these different product areas on the engineering side, and I'm going to be helping people navigate the code and tell them how to build things, but I didn't really realize that I have direct reports. And what does that mean when you have direct reports? I don't know. Let's just keep pushing through the code, and if they have questions and stuff, we'll talk about it in one-on-ones. But it didn't take long kind of following that pattern where I realized that's not going to scale. I have a bunch of people reporting to me now. I think it was as high as 8 or so near the beginning. And I realized I have to dedicate time towards helping these people out. And in fact, that's when I initially created DevLeader. DevLeader started as my blog, where I started to talk about the different things I was doing as someone that had gone from an individual contributor to a software engineering manager. I had no idea what I was doing, so I wanted to make sure the things I was learning I could share with other people. And it was a struggle because I was used to being an individual contributor. I was used to kicking off some of the initial code bases and working through them. So for me to be able to do what I thought my job was, which was produce code, I was going back and forth like a pendulum, coding for a while really hardcore and then kind of backing off, not coding anything to try and catch up investing time with the team. But as time continued on, we had more growth in our products, not only in the scope of what these products were doing, but in terms of the different products we were supporting. And during this time frame, yes, every year, thankfully, my salary is able to go up because of we have things like inflation that we're keeping up with, but also because of how I'm performing, my salary is going up too. So that's great news. But promotions, well, it's a startup. I'm one of the first people at this startup on the engineering side, and we don't even have levels. Not to mention, I'm now managing people, and there aren't many managers or directors or anything else. So, how does that work for any type of leveling, even as a manager? Well, didn't exist. But did I care? Not really. I kept working and I kept investing myself into this company because they were compensating me very fairly. And I felt like the work I was doing was really exciting. So a couple of years into it, I end up moving to manage a different team that I'm kicking off. And we're focused on doing mobile acquisitions in digital forensics. If that sounds cool, it's because it is. It was super awesome to be able to recover data from phones, and it was iPhones, Android phones, and we had this big competitor that had a monopoly over the whole market. And guess what? We were just a small team, and we started to catch up to all of their feature parity rapidly. It was so exciting to be able to go build this software and then start to catch up and have results, truly feeling like the underdog, like taking like huge strides and catching up. Honestly, like one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my career. But in addition to that, so we have this team going that I'm managing for digital forensics on mobile phones. I'm now leading prototyping for some other things that we might want to try out. So as you can see, my responsibilities at this company are growing, right? So I'm managing a team, but also kicking off these different initiatives to be able to do different types of digital forensics. Now, partway into this, we're already over 100 people, 200 people, and the scope and scale of the company in terms of hierarchy is starting to evolve. So they realize we need to start introducing different tiers and roles and levels to the engineering side as well as the management side. So I remember getting a conversation about the new title I was receiving, and it was technical manager. Awesome, super cool. So did my responsibilities change? No. Did my pay change? No. But this was almost, maybe, kinda like a promotion. Except not. It was just a title change. So up until this point, I'm several years into my professional career, and I have still not had a single promotion. However, I am a manager, and my pay has gone up, and I feel well compensated. Not only that, I'm doing things that I love. All of these things really resonate for me. But if you think about it on the surface, I haven't been getting promoted, and I haven't been chasing promotions either. So far, so good, but maybe not compared to someone else that was jumping company to company and getting higher and higher levels along the way. But I wasn't really caring about that. I was really doing stuff that I enjoyed. If we fast forward a little bit more, in my last few years at this company, I was now managing two teams. At this point, because my hands had been in so many different things and I'm managing two teams, I honestly didn't even have a lot of time to program. I still enjoy doing it, but at my desk, at my computer, at work, not coding too much. If I was coding, it might be after hours to help out because I really enjoyed doing it. But the reality was, in terms of time investment, it just didn't happen at work. That's because I was either working directly with my teams or I was spending time working with some of the other teams that had spun up from the different projects that I helped kick off. It was also at this point where I was spending a lot of times with other teams that were not from projects I kicked off, but because I had knowledge about the history of how these things evolved. By this point, it was about 8 years into working at this company. So when we talk about things like legacy code on this channel, refactoring, how we test stuff, like I had written code that had lived long enough to be the legacy code. So I had to help guide people through that. I was guiding them through like working with the new product managers, even though I'm an engineering manager, about some of the different decisions we made in the past and how we could maybe approach going forward, re-exploring some of those things. But by this point, my role and responsibilities had evolved so much since when I started there as a software engineer, building products that were already established, into someone that was helping spearhead new products, lead engineering teams, and offer assistance to all the product managers on all these other areas. So now I'm 8 years into my professional career. Still no promotions. But when I reflect on the experience, I don't think that I could have learned any more in that time frame. Literally every day was a new learning opportunity, so many different challenges. You name it, in terms of prioritizing things, addressing tech debt, how do we get features out the door, how do we fix critical bugs, how do we everything. It was so amazing to be able to work through all these things, and it felt like a whirlwind the entire time. And again, no promotions, but I worked with some of the best people that I ever have, and a lot of them are lifelong friends. And truthfully, none of those experience I would trade for anything. This leads me to my most recent career path, which was going to Microsoft. And for me, this was the biggest transition in my entire career. This was a point where I was taking an engineering manager role that was directly and specifically managing teams of engineers. And that meant that I didn't even have responsibility for writing code anymore. Even if I wanted to at work, there's not really a lot that I could obviously get my hands into. So it was really interesting to go from something that was like you're an engineering manager and you code to even if you want to code, like it's going to be a little bit awkward for you to get your hands into it. It was a huge life transition for me too, because it meant moving with my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, down to Seattle, all the way across the continent to start work at Microsoft. I was used to working with teams that I had built all of the code that they were working with. I had expert knowledge in all of the domain areas of the software because I was there at the beginning when it was being built. And now I was coming into a territory where I knew nothing about it. And it's worth mentioning, I was building desktop based software before for digital forensics. And now at Microsoft, I manage two different deployment teams that help deploy all of the M365 services globally in the entire world. And I was hired into Microsoft as a principal level software engineering manager. And I'm telling you that not to gloat or boast about it, because I've just told you I've never been promoted in my career so far. I have 8 years of experience leading up to this point professionally and have never been promoted. So, how did I get a principal level software engineering job? I had all of these different experiences that I accumulated along the way. When I went to interview at Microsoft, I was able to demonstrate those abilities. I was able to talk to different principal level and partner level individuals that could understand those. And despite not having any type of fancy title, because we really didn't have titles and levels at the place I was working at, they were kind of just rolling out, I was still able to demonstrate that I met the criteria to be successful at the job. And even though I didn't have experience deploying to data centers across the world, I was hired because they wanted someone with a different perspective. I was able to lean on my experiences and the fact that I have a unique, completely different perspective than a lot of the people that are currently working in that space. Now, things have changed a little bit for me over the past few years after coming to Microsoft because the work ethic that I employed at the previous job, I can't get away with that anymore. It's not really sustainable. I put in many, many long hours, often working 7 days a week, 6 days a week, and I don't know, sometimes like 12 to 14-hour days. It's just not realistic anymore. I do have a wife, and I think it's important that I'm spending time with her. I think it's important that I have some of my own time. But I have a really good work life balance at Microsoft. And even though I'm working with teams in different time zones, so I work with individuals that are paired up with us in China, so we have completely opposite work schedules. And we still make time to meet, and that might mean some early mornings or late nights to be able to collaborate. I'm still extremely passionate about the different projects we have and making sure that we can drive those to success. But honestly, this has been so eye opening for me because I really want to invest my time in my teams. I'm less interested in how good the code looks. I'm less interested in the best architecture. And the reason I'm less interested in that is because I know if I work with my teams and help empower them, they can do that. They can do a much better job than I ever could if I help them excel in their career and make sure that they're engaged in the work they're doing. And so now it's been about 3 years at Microsoft. I still have never been promoted in my entire professional career, and that's okay. I think part of being at big tech is looking at promotions and following that path, and that's become top of mind for me. I am interested in being able to grow and kind of continue on in my career that way. But honestly, I think as long as I'm receiving challenges that are very interesting, I have an awesome team to work with, and I feel fairly compensated, that's enough. So my takeaway message to you watching this is that all of our career paths are going to look different. I feel like personally, even though I never received like what I would call an official promotion, I still feel like I've been able to move my compensation to match what I feel like I'm valued at. I've been able to prioritize learning not only from like the technical perspective, but just really like business and how a software company works in general. I've been fortunate to have projects and things like that I'm extremely motivated and passionate about, and I've worked with amazing people. All of these things are absolutely awesome. For other individuals, they may not prioritize a path like that, and that's okay. Some people will be focusing on how they get right to the next level as fast as possible. And I think it's important that you're prioritizing a path that helps you benefit yourself in your career. I just don't like when it's done at the expense of actually being good and experienced at what you're doing. So, for example, if you hyper focus on just getting to the next level, regardless of what company you're at, and doing it as rapidly as you can, I suspect you reach a point where you're feeling like your imposter syndrome is not really just imposter syndrome. It's potentially that you don't have the skills to actually keep up in your role. And I'm not saying that happens to everyone. It's just a warning so that if you're trying to approach like this shorter path to get different promotions and things like that, that you're just keeping tabs on your capabilities. You don't want to arrive at a level where you feel like you can't actually deliver at that. So just ensure that along the way you are building up all those experiences. And for those of you that follow a path similar to me, if you're not focused on chasing down your promotions and things like that, it's not that it can't happen. It's not that you can't excel in your career and get to where you want to be. It just might look different. But something common in both of these paths is that you are responsible for driving the progress in your career. Waiting for someone to give you opportunities, I don't think is a good strategy. So in the one path, you are chasing down promotions and trying to get to the next level, but hyper focusing on that. The path I took, I wasn't chasing promotions, but I was chasing more responsibility. I was continuously trying to demonstrate, look, I can do this and I can do it well. I was very fortunate to be at places that rewarded me for that. So they would give me that opportunity, they trusted me, and then I could deliver on it. If you're not in an environment where that can happen, you will probably feel very frustrated because you will be trying to do that, not have the opportunity, and then if you're not chasing for the promotions, you're just going to feel like you're stuck. So all of that to say, we all have different paths, and I highly encourage you to think about what things that you value in your career. So thanks so much for watching this and letting me share my experience with you.